Welcome to the Explainer. For so long, the fight against Alzheimer's has felt, well, pretty hopeless. But that's changing. Right now, we are at a genuine turning point, something that is totally rewriting the script for this devastating disease. So let's just look at this contrast. For decades, treating Alzheimer's was really just about managing the symptoms. You could try to ease things a little, but the disease itself, it just kept marching on. It was a story of resignation. But today, that story is completely different. We've moved from just handling the fallout to actually intervening, and for the first time ever, slowing the disease itself down.
So what's behind this huge shift? Well, it all comes down to a new way of understanding the disease, and more importantly, a totally new class of drugs that are, frankly, changing everything we thought was possible.
And I really want you to let that sink in. For the first time ever, we have approved drugs that can actually change the course of Alzheimer's. This isn't just about making someone a little less confused for a little while. Nope. We are talking about going after one of the root causes of the brain damage itself, something scientists have been chasing for generations.
All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. The science here is all about a new kind of weapon. They're called anti-amyloid monoclonal antibodies. Yeah, I know, it's a mouthful. But the idea behind them is absolutely revolutionary. Let's break down exactly what they do.
So the number one target for these new drugs, it's something called amyloid plaques. You can just think of them as these toxic, sticky clumps of protein. For a long, long time, we believed they're a major villain in the Alzheimer's story. They build up in the spaces between your brain cells and just gum up the works, disrupting communication and eventually helping to kill off those brain cells. Okay, so how do you get rid of this toxic gunk? Well, the best way to think about these new drugs is to see them as a specialized cleanup crew. But here's the cool part. They don't actually do the cleaning themselves. They're more like a foreman on a job site, pointing out exactly what needs to go and calling in the brain's own immune system to do the heavy lifting.
It's a really elegant process, and it works in 3 steps. First, the drug gets into your brain and acts like a guided missile, seeking out and tagging those toxic amyloid plaques. Then, step 2, that tag sends up a big red flag, alerting the brain's own resident immune cells. They're called microglia. And finally, step 3, those microglia, now on high alert, come in and clear out all the tagged amyloid. It's like they're finally getting the orders to take out the trash.
The big question, of course, is, does it actually work? And the answer is a resounding yes. Look at the clinical trials for 2 of these drugs, lecanemab and donanemab. The results were pretty amazing. Compared to a placebo, lecanemab slowed down cognitive decline by 27%. Donanemab did even better, slowing it by 35%. Now, these are people in the early stages of the disease, but that's a real measurable difference.
Okay, but we have to be super clear here. This is so important. These drugs are not a cure. I'll say it again, they're not a cure. They don't bring back lost memories or reverse the damage that's already been done. But what they do is something that's never, ever been done before. They prove that we can actually change the course of Alzheimer's. We can slow it down. It might seem like a small step, but it is absolutely monumental.
And here's where it gets even more exciting. Clearing out that amyloid gunk, that's just the start. The success of these first-generation drugs has basically kicked the doors wide open for a ton of new research. We're now looking beyond amyloid to other targets and even some wild new technologies.
So if amyloid is the bad guy building up between brain cells, there's another troublemaker that builds up inside them. It's a protein called tau, and it forms these things called tangles. And many scientists believe that tau is even more directly linked to how bad your symptoms get. So you can bet that researchers are already hard at work developing drugs to go after tau. It's the next big battleground.
And it's not just about new pills or infusions. Scientists are getting really creative, exploring things that honestly sound like they're straight out of science fiction. They're using things like physics and even just light and sound to get the brain to help itself.
Okay, check this out. It's called focused ultrasound. So your brain has this amazing security system, right? The blood-brain barrier. It's super picky about what it lets in, which is great for keeping out toxins, but it also blocks a lot of potentially helpful drugs. This new tech is so clever. Tiny microbubbles are injected into the bloodstream. Then ultrasound waves are aimed at a precise spot in the brain. The waves make the bubbles vibrate, and that vibration gently and temporarily opens a tiny door in that barrier. That lets drugs get in or can even just kickstart the brain's own cleanup.
And then there's this approach, which is just mind-blowing. It doesn't involve any drugs or surgery at all. Instead, it's about trying to restore the brain's natural rhythms. Researchers at MIT found that just by exposing mice to flickering light and sound at a very specific frequency, they could get the brain to trigger its own massive cleanup of those amyloid plaques, just with light and sound.
So what's the magic number? It's 40 hertz. This frequency matches the brain's own gamma waves, which, what do you know, are often out of whack in people with Alzheimer's. And get this, early studies in humans are already showing that daily exposure to this 40 hertz light and sound can actually slow down brain shrinkage. It seems to have this powerful protective effect. A big trial is happening right now to confirm it.
But look, we don't have to wait for all this future tech to make a real difference. In fact, some of the most powerful tools are things we can all do right now. There was this huge study called the Finger Study, and it proved, without a doubt, that when you combine a bunch of healthy lifestyle changes, we're talking diet, exercise, keeping your brain busy, staying social, it creates this incredibly powerful protective shield for your brain. It really works.
And that brings us to what I think is the most empowering part of this whole story. Because this science isn't just about treating the disease after it starts. It's about preventing it. There are real, scientifically proven things you can do starting, well, right now, to lower your own risk. So when we talk about risk factors, you can probably guess some of them, right? Things like blood pressure, exercise. But there's one huge, modifiable risk factor that often gets completely overlooked. It's super common, and more importantly, it's very treatable. Any guesses what it might be?
The answer? Untreated hearing loss. It sounds surprising, right? But think about it. When your brain is constantly straining to hear, or just not getting enough sound information, a couple of things happen. It can lead to you pulling away from social life, and your brain actually starts to reorganize itself in ways that, over time, can speed up cognitive decline.
And the effect of treating it is just wow. A huge study in 2023 showed that for older adults who were already at risk, simply using a hearing aid slowed their rate of cognitive decline by 47%. Nearly half. That is a massive, massive impact from a relatively simple fix. So, beyond getting your hearing checked, what else can you do? Well, the science is really clear. It's not about one single magic bullet. It's about a whole action plan. It's about getting your body moving, eating a brain-healthy diet like the Mediterranean diet, and keeping your mind and your social life active. All that stuff builds what scientists call cognitive reserve. It's like a buffer for your brain. And of course, the basics matter a lot. Getting good sleep and keeping your blood pressure and cholesterol in check.
It really all boils down to a simple phrase you hear from every single researcher in this field. What's good for your heart is good for your brain. It's that simple. Protecting your brain isn't a one-and-done thing. It's an active, lifelong job. And the best part? It is never too late to start.
So think about where we are now. We've gone from an era where Alzheimer's felt inevitable to an era of real intervention. We have drugs that can slow the disease. We have incredible new technologies just around the corner. And we have a proven playbook for how to lower our own risk. Which leaves us with one final question, a question that, for the very first time, feels genuinely full of hope.